Good evening. Welcome to the Big Story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Verzosa.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
Tonight's big stories. The NBI recommends the charges of inciting to sedition and grave threats against Vice President Sara Duterte for threatening the President, the First Lady, and House Speaker during an online rant.
As expected, well, that's Duterte's short but not so sweet response to the prospect of criminal charges, while her ally, attorney Sal Panelo, called on the NBI director to go back to law school.
Truly, it is an open feud, and other Duterte allies also hit at President Bongbong Marcos after he took swipes at his predecessor's bloody drug war and pro-China stance during the Alianza team's campaign kickoff.
A looming impeachment trial, and now this. The National Bureau of Investigation, or NBI, has recommended criminal charges of inciting to sedition and grave threats against Vice President Sara Duterte.
That's for saying she arranged the assassination of President Bongbong Marcos, his wife Liza, and his cousin, House Speaker Martin Romualdez, in case she herself gets killed. Now, recall that Duterte said all this during a midnight virtual conference with reporters in November 23 last year.
But just like the impeachment complaint, Duterte brushed it off, saying that she has been expecting this. What she is not expecting, she said, is fairness from the NBI. Mary Monreyes has tonight's big story.
As expected, that's Vice President Sara Duterte's simple reaction to the NBI's recommendation to file criminal cases against her. That verdict came almost 3 months after Duterte's remarks on November 23. In that midnight virtual press conference, Sara said she had contracted someone to murder President Bongbong Marcos, First Lady Liza, and Speaker Martin Romualdez in case she is killed first. Fast forward to February 12, after the NBI's proven case build-up, the Bureau says Duterte can be charged for 1 count of inciting to sedition and 3 counts for grave threats.
Yung pagkaka-threaten niya sa Pangulo, no, na-incite yung kanyang mga followers. So we take that seriously.
Recall that the NBI subpoenaed VP Duterte twice over the incident. She did not respond, following her legal counsel's advice that she can simply submit a counter-affidavit. But that counter-affidavit never came from Duterte's camp. With or without that document, the NBI believes it has solid evidence on the cases they've recommended against VP Duterte. Now, everything's up to the Department of Justice, which can decide if it's going ahead with evidence and pursue a full-blown case.
Kung ang DOJ ay makakita ng prima facie evidence that magkakaroon ng certainty of conviction, ipapile nila ang kaso. Pero kung walang certainty of conviction, maaaring maibasura rin yung kaso na aming inirecommend ipinail.
For now, according to the DOJ, the case will undergo evaluation and preliminary investigation by the National Prosecution Service. On the question if her criminal cases would interfere with Duterte's impending impeachment trial, Senate President Chis Escudero says no. Senator Francis Tolentino agrees.
An impeachment court, like any court, is a passive body. Wala kaming gagawin. Hindi to parang investigasyon ng Senado na mag-iiso kami ng sabpina para sa mga ebidensya o testigo na magpunta.
That is separate from the impeachment case. In fact, any conviction, any acquittal will not implicate the provision on the principle of double jeopardy. Even if you're acquitted, a case can be filed against you.
Mobile journalist Mary Monreyes, we are One News.
On our sister program, Storycon earlier, NBI Director Jaime Santiago said the cases they have recommended against Vice President Sara Duterte could make her serve a minimum of 6 months up to a lifetime in jail, although both the crimes of grave threat and inciting to sedition are bailable. But the question is, will authorities be able to compel Sara Duterte to reveal who her alleged assassin is?
Pwede pong ma-compel siya na umattend, pero yung magbigay siya ng information tungkol dyan sa bagay na yan, katulad namin, ay hindi po siya nagpipili.
Meanwhile, Duterte ally Sal Panelo had this to say, and I quote, "The director of the NBI should go back to law school. His agency's recommendation to file criminal charges of grave threats and inciting to sedition against VP Sara has no basis in fact and in law. It obviously is tainted with politics and still part of the demolition job on her by her political enemies to put her out of contention in the presidential race of 2028. The former presidential spokesman also reiterated that there can be no crime of threat from the grave. Neither has VP Sara publicly and tumultuously incited the people to perform acts of sedition as defined by law, nor to go against the constituted authorities or to stop the enforcement of laws. Panelo also said instead of harassing the vice president and wasting taxpayers' money, the NBI should instead focus on stopping and filing charges against legitimate criminals.
Now the ball is squarely in the DOJ's court, and let's try to hash this out further. We have with us tonight Justice Undersecretary Jesse Andres, who joins us live via Zoom. Good evening, Yusek Andres. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to the Big Story.
Yes, good evening, Regina, Shawn, and Pauline. Good evening to everyone.
Right, let's get right to it. This is a pretty heavy case to talk about. You heard our reporting earlier. The DOJ has already said it will undergo evaluation and preliminary investigation based on the recommendation that the NBI has filed. What happens exactly from here on? What is the, in that process, what do you do?
Well, first, let's put everything into context. The Vice President, while she is facing impeachment charges presently, is still not immune from suit. So this criminal case is one instance where a possible violation of the law can still be enforced against the Vice President on matters of accountability. So the law enforcement agent in this particular case, the National Bureau of Investigation, has come up with its report, its investigation report, and has transmitted the same to the Department of Justice with certain recommendations on possible criminal charges that may be filed against the Vice President, namely grave threats and inciting to sedition. So the process would require an initial evaluation from the investigating prosecutors to determine whether the submission provided by the National Bureau of Investigation, the evidence thus far submitted and adduced before the DOJ, is already sufficient to file a case in court. Let me emphasize something. This is a very good test case because presently the Department of Justice is enforcing a new procedure under Department of Justice Circular number 20, where the threshold of evidence that is needed before a person can be charged in court is now higher. It is no longer probable cause, but prima facie evidence with reasonable certainty of conviction. And what does that mean? When you say prima facie evidence, it means that all the elements of the offense or crime charge is already present based on the evidence. And the prosecutor's evaluation should mean that there is reasonable certainty that once presented in court, this will lead to a conviction. So presently, the complaint of the NBI is with the Department of Justice, and we will thoroughly evaluate the evidence. And part of the process is to subpoena the Vice President to enable her to submit her counter affidavit to give her due process. The preliminary investigation is a process where due process is assured the respondent. And we are not harassing the Vice President by issuing the subpoena. It is just a measure to enable her to get a copy of the complaint together with all the evidence and to allow her a period of time to submit her version, her counter affidavit, or any of her defenses. So based on what she will submit as her counter affidavit and what the NBI has given to the DOJ, then we will make that evaluation whether this is something that is considered a strong case that warrants a filing of the charges in court, Or otherwise, if there is no sufficient evidence, then we will dismiss the case for lack of evidence.
Just to manage expectations here, Yusek Jesse, she is not required to attend, right? She just has to submit a counter affidavit, which can be done through her attorneys.
Yeah, what is important in the process of preliminary investigation is the opportunity to be heard. So under the Constitution, you have the right against self-incrimination. You cannot be forced to testify if you do not wish to testify, and you can choose not to testify. However, after having been given the opportunity to put up your defense, then the Department of Justice will have to make that evaluation. So if she will submit her counter affidavit, then it will be part of the evidence that will be considered by the investigating prosecutor, and we are constituting a panel. The National Prosecution Service has constituted a panel that will evaluate the record. It's not just one individual. So based on the evidence that she will provide under her counter affidavit, and also what the NBI has already adduced so far, we will make that evaluation. And let me point out another matter. Under the new department circular, the DOJ prosecutors are also tasked to collaborate and coordinate with the law enforcement agents to possibly do a case build-up. Meaning, if there are insufficient evidence that are available at present, nothing prevents the law enforcement agents from getting additional evidence, and for the prosecutors to help them and guide them in doing this case build-up together. Because the main purpose or objective of this reform that we have institutionalized is to make sure that when we file cases, we have evidence at hand and not evidence that we will secure during the course of the trial. That is no longer the practice. You have to have the evidence in the hands of the prosecutors before we commence the filing of the case. So that is for the protection of the accused, and that is in consonance with the protection of human rights.
So the threshold of evidence is higher this time. We're not just talking about probable
Yes.
cause. We're talking prima facie, which means all of the elements of the charge have to be there. There's a video of her admitting to contracting an assassin to kill the president should she get killed herself, fall under that, because we're talking about all of this is because of that online press con that she conducted, right? So it came from her directly.
You got
She
cut
said it
off,
herself.
But, okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, we are not making that evaluation. I am not allowed to make that evaluation. It will be the panel of prosecutors who will have the chance to examine and evaluate all the evidence together with the counter affidavit. But part of the real evidence or object evidence that will be considered will be the video that is now preserved and submitted before the DOJ. What is important here is that the threshold of evidence is no longer probable cause. Before you can be charged and the law can be used as a weapon because there is such a minimal amount of evidence. But here, the prosecutors who will certify that there should be a case filed in court will incur certain administrative liabilities if there is no actual evidence at hand. So definitely, there will have to be evidence that is sufficient to prove all the elements of the offensive charge. It can be grave threats, it can be inciting to sedition, it can be both, or it can be other crimes that may eventually be proven in the course of the case build-up. So you can imagine that the onus, the burden is now on the law enforcement agents and the prosecutors to build up a case. Everything that the Department of Justice is doing moving forward in the prosecution of cases is what we call evidence-based prosecution.
Okay,
So everything will depend on the evidence. If it is sufficient, then we will definitely apply the full force of the law. We will ensure that all the evidence that is needed will be there and will be presented in court, and we will make sure that the rule of law is followed. and due process is also strictly observed.
Yusek, there's two charges here. We're talking inciting to sedition as well as grave threats. Is it possible that the panel of prosecutors or the NPS, the task force will or could eventually decide to drop one of these cases or one of these charges?
Yes.
Is that also in the works or possible?
Let me explain that. The duty of the prosecutor is not simply to get incriminating evidence. No. The duty of the prosecutor, together with the LEA, is to gather all evidence that is relevant, whether incriminating or exculpatory, meaning evidence that could possibly cause the dismissal of the case is also the object of the investigation. So under our new rules, the LEAs and the prosecutors are tasked to do both things: consider incriminating and exculpatory evidence or evidence that will show the innocence of the accused. So we will weigh everything, and definitely due process will be observed by giving the Vice President full opportunity to present her side by way of a counter affidavit or even with the presentation of witnesses that she may bring forth to establish her defense. So that's much we are assuring the public. And if the Vice President is saying that the work of the NBI is as expected, our response is, it is as expected because the law should be respected. It doesn't mean that if you are a high official or an ordinary individual, a different standard is being used. No, there is only one standard for the rule of law, and the due process is something that we will guarantee. And a fair evaluation and a just resolution will be forthcoming from the Department of Justice.
Well, Yusek, you did explain earlier already that the Vice President is not immune to suit, but the question is, if she is found guilty, can she be sentenced to jail term while still in office? And are we correct, as we reported earlier, these crimes are still bailable? And tama po ba na 6 months minimum ang tinitignan na jail term for these crimes?
Well, correct. First, she is not immune from suit. Second, the offenses are bailable. And even if she is convicted, it cannot amount to her removal from office. But a criminal penalty, a sentence, could be rendered by the trial court after the court is convinced that there is proof beyond reasonable doubt, and a penalty of imprisonment could possibly be issued by the court after trial. But that cannot amount to the removal of the Vice President, and that penalty, if it will be implemented, has to be after. Because the President and the Vice President, as impeachable officers, can only be removed through that process of impeachment, which is a totally different process from a criminal prosecution.
Understood, Yusek, but following this train of thought, right, because of the higher threshold of evidence, which is now prima facie evidence, it also follows that eventually the panel of prosecutors could decide to just drop the charges if they can't find sufficient evidence, prima facie evidence at that.
Let me share the long-term vision of the Department of Justice. The court congestion is caused by so many cases filed where there is just a minimal amount of evidence that satisfies probable cause. That has caused so much problem already. That's why courts are congested with weak cases. We have to stop that practice. Only in this present administration did we institutionalize this reform. Only when there is a strong case and where evidence is complete will we actually file the case. So that eventually even the judges will find that the DOJ is very serious whenever it files cases. It does not file cases with weak evidence or weak cases. So that is the manner by which we will address court congestion. Cases that are strong will be filed, and the serious cases will only be based on evidence. And if there is no evidence, as you are asking, there is no other option but to discontinue the prosecution and dismiss the case. So that is also a possibility if the evidence is insufficient. And that will come after preliminary investigation and all the parties are given their chance to present their side.
So the DOJ is going to begin the evaluation and preliminary investigation. But Yusek, if I recall correctly, shortly after her online press conference in November last year, we also spoke to the DOJ, not yourself, but I think it was Asek Clavano, if I recall correctly. And at that time, the DOJ said that it was already looking into the case. Right. So whatever happened from that, and are you saying that you're starting from scratch now, or you've already got a case build up?
No, we are not starting from scratch. The National Bureau of Investigation is an attached agency of the Department of Justice. It was tasked to conduct the thorough investigation, and it is only now that they have completed their investigation, and it is only now that they are submitting these pieces of evidence that they have gathered. So it is not correct to say that we are not aware of the previous things that have been happening in the course of their investigation, but they have formally transmitted the result of their investigation, their findings, and it will now be given to a distinct panel of prosecutors for preliminary investigation. That is a different group that will make that evaluation and judgment.
So, one department to another.
Right. No, I understand that the NBI reports to the DOJ ultimately, but the timing of this all, to some people, is suspect because obviously this is coming 2 weeks after her impeachment. We are, at the start of the midterm elections campaign. So it could be seen as political, is my point, right?
No, absolutely. I will have to say there's nothing political about this particular process. We have to be very circumspect. We could not file a case earlier. We could not, just fast track the investigation. We have to give the law enforcement agent sufficient time to complete the investigation. And if there is no evidence, then we will not proceed with the filing of the case. But definitely, if the DOJ, in the course of preliminary investigation, will find that there is no sufficient evidence, we will do what is necessary to give justice. And that is possibly dismiss the case. But all in the spirit of fairness, equality, due process, and always based on evidence. So we let us see in these coming days after we give the panel a chance to make that evaluation. And after the Vice President submits, hopefully, her counter affidavit, because even if she did not submit her counter affidavit during the proceedings before the NBI, she can still presently submit a counter affidavit to explain her defense and the facts surrounding her utterances.
Oh, so last year when she was summoned to the NBI headquarters to explain her side, she never appeared nor submitted an affidavit. Okay.
No, but she will still have the chance. We will provide her the chance.
But can we talk timelines here, Yusek? I know this is kind of an unfair question because sometimes things move differently, but as to Regina's point, and as you were saying, this is not political and it's just plodding along as it would in a regular proceeding. Yeah. Can you give us an idea? So you said that the NBI had this amount of time and they've determined that, okay, they're done, and now they toss the ball to the DOJ and now it goes to the panel of prosecutors. How much time will they be given for their preliminary investigation and evaluation? Is there roughly like some guidelines?
As I said, we will try to do everything in a very regular manner, meaning we will try to meet the normal deadlines, even for this case. And normally it is 60 days to 90 days for a panel or investigating prosecutor to complete the preliminary investigation. But again, we will be very flexible if the respondents would want more time to present their side. We will accommodate that. But ideally, it has to be completed within 60 to 90 days. If there are complex issues, 90 days. But if the evidence is already sufficient and the legal matter is not complex, hopefully we will be able to complete it within, at the most, 90 days.
It's really like right smack, that's 60 to 90 days, that's right smack within the campaign period.
That's within our rules.
Yes, and it's also...
Let me be blunt about it. Is there external pressure on the DOJ to fast track or move this case along?
No, no. Definitely, our mandate is to deliver justice. We call it real justice in real time. Justice delayed is justice denied, but presently, we have no other matter in our agenda except to give due process and finish this after a fair evaluation of the evidence.
Okay, so when can we expect, the next move from, at least in this case, would it be the submission of the counter affidavit, which is still an open invitation and can be done anytime? And then after that, we wait 60 to 90 days for the...
Yes.
But, Lea,
Yes, the National Prosecution Service will issue that subpoena soon after making its initial evaluation. And as I said, within 60 to 90 days, we will provide the respondent a chance to submit the counter affidavit and the NBI to do further case build-up. And then within that period, we will resolve this. And I assure everyone that the evaluation of the evidence will be done in a fair and just manner.
What's interesting about this is the Vice President herself does not see what she said as a threat, right? And if I may quote her, her response last year was, "Common sense should be enough for us to understand and accept that a supposed conditional act of revenge does not constitute an active threat. This is plan without a flesh," is what she said last year when asked about the threats. Even just a few days ago when she was asked about threatening the president's life, she said that was not a threat. That's she threw it back to the reporter. So she doesn't see it that way. Help us understand what weight this has on the case.
Well, we respect her opinion. And if she will only reduce that statement into a part of her counter affidavit, then that can be considered by the investigation panel. That's a most welcome response coming from her. And that should form part of our records, the evidence that will be evaluated. So if that is her point of view, then it should be part of her official statement under oath through the counter affidavit that she can submit to the panel.
Yusek, will the DOJ also be investigating the alleged threat on the life of the Vice President?
We wanted to investigate that even last year. If you recall, part of the reason for the subpoena of the NBI is to investigate the alleged threat against the life of the Vice President. And unfortunately, she did not want to present herself before the NBI, and she did not give any other details. So it's very unfortunate, but we cannot begin the investigation without any specific leads coming from the Vice President. And hopefully she can change her mind and she can provide us the information. And we will forthwith, immediately, do the investigation for her.
We now know what that word means, everybody.
Well, the legal definition is still being debated about that word forthwith. But just to be very clear, as far as the DOJ is concerned, there are no active threats on the Vice President's life at the moment, as far as you know?
No, none that we have noted with our intelligence community and none with the NBI.
Okay. We're going to have to leave that there. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
It helped enlighten us to this case. That was Justice Undersecretary Jessie Andres.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, but coming up next, here comes the word war. Allies of Digong Duterte clap back at President Marcos for criticizing his predecessor's policies during the Alianza's campaign kickoff. Don't miss that story. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here on One News. The administration's campaign kickoff saw a different side of President Marcos as he wasn't fighting for as he led his Alianza para sa Bagong Pilipinas candidates at their rally in Lawag yesterday.
Wala sa kanila ang may bahid ng dugo dahil sa tukhang. Wala sa kanilang kasabwat sa pagbulsa ng sako-sakong pera, pinagsamantalaan ang krisis ng pandemya, pinabayaan ang ating mga kababayan na magkasakit at mamatay. Wala po sa kanila ang tilang sakristan ng isang bulaang propeta na nasasakdal dahil sa pagyurak sa ating kabataan at sa ating kababaihan. Wala sa kanila ang tagataguyod ng pugad ng krimen. Wala sa kanila ang mga pumapalakpak sa China at natutuwa pa kapag tayo ay binobomba ng tubig. Tayo ba ay papayag na babalik sa panahon gusto ng kung kailan gusto ng ating mga liderato maging probinsya tayo ng China? Babalik ba tayo sa nakaraan na ibinubugaw ang ating bayan bilang isang sugalan ng mga dayuhan?
Although the president did not name names, everyone understood who he was referring to. Oplan Tokhang, the Pharmaly scandal, and the pivot to China were all controversial issues in the Duterte administration. And pundits say the prophet that Marcos mentioned in his speech referred to Apollo Kibuloy, the detained religious leader who is running for the Senate under PDP Laban. And while the Dutertes themselves have yet to respond to the president's attacks, some of their allies have spoken up. Former House Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez posted a statement simply saying there are no drug addicts in the Duterte ticket. Recall that Duterte has been accusing Marcos of being a cocaine user for years. Meanwhile, former presidential legal advisor Salvador Panelo, for his part, questioned the Marcos administration's stand on the drug war and its policy on China.
Kung titingnan mo, yung sinasabi niyang tokhang, wala pang kaso akong natatandaan na ipinail ng administrasyon ito tungkol doon sa operasyon ng tokhang. Pangalawa, yung sinasabi niya naman na ito raw ay mga tagapagtanggol ng China, mukhang misplaced naman yon dahil ang foreign policy naman ni Presidente Duterte nung panahon niya ay may kapagkaibigan sa China at dahil nga doon ay walang sigalot, walang gulo sa panahon niya. Ngayon lang na nagkagulo kasi naaway ng administrasyon ng China.
And senatorial candidate Jimmy Bondoc denounced the alleged $241 billion in insertions in the 2025 national budget.
Isipin niyo, mga tao walang sala, kinukulong sa ospital. Pero yung mga nagpapalsify ng budget, malaya.
ACT Teachers Party List Representative Franz Castro, meanwhile, pointed out that Marcos wasn't entirely accurate when he said his team did not have blood on their hands. Some of the candidates running under Alianza were in fact silent at the height of Duterte's bloody drug war.
Well, doon sa speech niya tungkol doon sa kanyang mga kandidato na walang bahid ng dugo, no? Pero parang I beg to disagree kasi nung panahon na kino-question natin ang war on drugs, may mga kandidato doon na hindi naman kumibo, no? Hindi nga nag-file ng mga resolution nung panahon ni Duterte. Kaya sa tingin ko, i-re-examine ni BBM yung kanyang mga kandidato, yung mga track record.
All right, let's get on to our second guest here to discuss yesterday's events. We have political strategist Gerald Daquina. Mr. Daquina served as political officer for President Bongbong Marcos when he was senator from 2013 to 2017. Welcome to the Big Story, Gerald. Gerald, can you hear me?
Yeah. Good evening po.
Hi.
Lahat ng mga nanonood ngayon. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. May lag lang, but it's okay.
Magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. Yeah.
Gerald, you're coming from the Alianza para sa Bagong Pilipinas campaign kickoff in Lawag. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry po. I'm on my way back to Manila from the kickoff rally sa Lawag last night.
So do I take it to mean that you are representing the administration candidates?
Right now, I am the Chief Political Officer of Senator Francis Valentino, which is the electionist under the Alianza.
Okay, so but you're not, you're no longer representing the president, President Marcos.
No, I was with the president when he was a
Yes.
senator, and
Gerald, could you, okay, so since you're coming from the Lawag rally, could you give us your assessment? Ano yung, what did you think of the campaign kickoff for the Alianza slate?
well, for me, I think very successful yung kickoff rally last night. It's Lawag, ano, ng Alianza. And the speech of the president is very accurate for sa lahat ng sinabi niya. Naniniwala ako na accurate lahat yan. Yung mga yung nagsasabi na hindi totoo yan, I beg to disagree.
What about to those saying, no, Gerald, na ito namang alyansa slate, talagang lahat naman ng malalakas, pinagkumpul-kumpul lang. Kumbaga, they just brought together and formed a coalition based on the strongest candidates. Would you say sapat na yun na strategy to win, I suppose?
No, actually, binuo itong alyansa ng ating Pangulo at ng kanyang mga advisors based on track records. You can see sa lahat ng kandidato natin, wala dyan baguhan. Lahat yan may nagawa na. Wala dyan nangangako pa lang. Kasi lahat yan, may mga napatunayan na.
Well, Jared, I also wanted to ask, no, kagabi, nung nag-kick off nga yung campaign ng Alyansa para sa Bagong Pilipinas, a lot of people were shocked with how President Marcos started off that campaign. Sabi ng iba, parang medyo negative, di ba? Maraming pinaparinggan. Although he did not name names, alam naman natin kung sino yung mga yan or yung issues na pinag-uusapan ng Pangulo. Can we expect more of that? And why do you think ganito yung atake ng administration slate? Gerald? All right, seems his connection is a bit...
Yeah, the connection is a bit spotty. I think he's in transit.
Because he's in transit and coming from Lawag too. Gerald?
Kita naman nyo, for the past few months, sa about time, kasi kung makikita naman nyo, yung attack... Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah? Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Can you say that
Hello?
again?
Hello?
Yes,
Hi,
Gerald,
Gerald.
we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Actually, if you can recall, itong mga nakaraan, itong mga past few months, grabe na din naman ng banat ng opposition or ng other camp sa administration. So itong speech ni Presidente kahapon, it's very accurate. Kasi nagsimula tayo sa tokhang, hundreds died ng mga inosenteng tao. Alam natin lahat yan. Unang-una na yung kinakiyan, sabi nga nila, nasentensyahan daw yung 4 o 5 police involved, yung kikiyan. So it means, nagkamali talaga sila. Pero nagkamali man sila, makulong man yung mga nagkamali, yung buhay ng bata, wala na, hindi na naibabalik. Batang-bata pa yan. Hindi lang si Kiyan. Hundreds, maybe thousands ang namatay last administration na walang kasalanan. So hindi natin papayagan na maibalik ulit yan. Madugong laban sa droga. No, kung pwede ko sabihin, totoo ba talaga na laban kaya sa droga?
But the point, Gerald, is that this is a change in tone for the president because for a long time he refused to say anything negative about the Dutertes, even though yung allies niya have started to speak up. These are the strongest words we've heard from the president regarding the previous administration. What do you think? Is this a political calculation? Did he think to himself, okay, now that the campaign period has officially begun, I'm going to go all out in the attack? I think the line is a little bit choppy, a bit under. Gerald? Well, I think we've lost him. Let's try to get him back online. Maybe we could speak to him over the phone. The Zoom is just unreliable. But
Siguro isip ating na malaman ng tao na nagmamahal. Hello?
Yes, Gerald.
Hi, Gerald. Maybe we can try to get Gerald on the phone. That might be clearer without the added onus of video.
Yes. But it's interesting to see because who was it who said that there will be no? It was Kong Irwin who said that he doesn't want any negative campaigning for the team. He doesn't want to pagod na lahat ng tao with all the infighting, and then here comes the president on the biggest podium yet, talking to thousands of supporters, hitting the Duterte administration.
Well, I think a lot of people were really surprised by the spiciness of the president's words because, you know, he's so affable usually. He tries to avoid and dodge saying these things categorically.
Exactly.
And then he went on, even as far as some pundits pointed out, pati si Apollo Kibuloy hindi nakalusot kahit na malayo naman siya dun sa Magic 12. Which,
remember when Vice President Sara Duterte went on her online rant, the reporters were chasing after him. Ina-ambush interview siya at the events, but he would always say no comment or I don't want to talk about that. Basta he would try to avoid it.
He just usually laugh it off actually. That's why when you watch his speech, him delivering his speech, he was
like very emphatic,
very strong actually.
Very few instances also that I can only remember of President Marcos being so strong with his words. The last one I remember was when he said, "Di ko papalagan ko yan," right? When he was when the vice president made threats on his life and his wife and his cousin. So for him to have a different tone for this campaign is interesting, and I wonder if we're going to see more of that in the days to come.
Although let's point out that he was reading a speech. It was not the usual like extemporaneous that we hear during campaign rallies. He was actually reading it. So I don't know. Was he the one who wrote it? Did he approve it? Yes,
So
there were like
I noticed the hand gestures. I think we have political strategist Gerald Daquina back on the line. Gerald, can you hear me okay?
Is this better? Okay, still not there.
Still not there. We're gonna try again maybe a little later on.
Yes, but literally maybe you know, this change in tone, everyone is now reading into it. In fact, last night, there wasn't much literature on that, but today, everyone was just piecing apart the script.
Because it's so
wordings.
unlike him.
Yes.
It is very much unlike him. And the question in my mind is this part of the political calculation? Did he decide, okay, well, I mean, most of the administration bets are in comfortable positions in pre-election surveys. So I don't think they have to make up a whole lot of a whole lot of ground here, but I wonder where this is coming from because he must know that whatever he says makes the national news, right? And if he comes out, you know, with fighting words against the previous administration, then that's really open feud.
He's really drawing the line now. Before he would be cagey, he would be trying to dodge, but now he really drew the line. Like it's us versus them. And I don't know, maybe the impeachment had something to do with it. Maybe all this talk of which Congress will hear the impeachment, which makes this senatorial slate all the more, I guess, important or meaningful, or that's the implication. I think Gerald is back.
Let's try him one more time. Gerald, political strategist Gerald Daquina. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, there, sounds good.
Yes, I'm sorry. Medyo hindi stable yung Zoom.
Oh, I guess because you're on the road.
Sorry, ladies. Sorry,
No,
that's okay. That's okay. But the question there, the last question there, I don't know if you heard, was what's different this time around with President Marcos is his tone, right? For a long time, he avoided hitting out at the Dutertes, at the opposition. But this time around, we saw a different side of him. He was openly criticizing the previous administration's policies. And I wonder, do you think that's part of a political calculation na, okay, since campaign period has begun, all bets are off? What do you think?
Yes, actually, siguro, no? Naisip ng ating Pangulo na it's about time. It's about time to speak up sa mga nangyayari. Kasi masyado na nagiging mabait ang ating Pangulo sa lahat ng mga tinitira laban sa kanya. And to think, lahat naman ng sinasabi ng kabilang partido, wala naman katotohanan. Not unlike yung sinabi ng ating Pangulo kahapon, what he said yesterday, it's very accurate. Isa-isahin natin, accurate lahat yan. Magsimula sa tokhang, magsimula sa pandemic, na ang mamahal na mga face mask, test kits, alam ng lahat yan. during the time ni Secretary Duque, nasa LDOH, di ba? So, very accurate lahat ng sinabi niya. He's not creating any scenario na sinungaling or what.
Oh, pero what do you think, no? Kasi lumabas ito at itong campaign period, Gerald, talagang nakapag-timing, no? Sa election period, dito sa budget bruhaha na nakita natin dito sa impeachment. So, very, very political as we all know coming into the midterms in 2025. What makes the Senate or the 20th Congress and the Senate lineup, the 12 that will come in, is baka nga sila yung maglitis nito. So, do you think in a way, parinig or kumbaga nagpaparinig sa mga Duterte and setting the stage, no, kung ano yung expectation niya from his... sige, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, it's not parinig. It's letting the people know na wag na tayong bumalik sa dati. Wag na tayong bumalik sa maduling tokang. Wag na tayong bumalik sa pagiging tuta ng China. Wag na tayong bumalik sa pag-overprice ng kung ano man binibili ng ating gobyerno. Kaya sana suportahan natin ang kandidato ng alyansa. Something like that. Yun yung message niya.
But Gerald, I'm curious, based on your expertise, are voters more responsive sa ganitong klaseng pangangampanya?
Actually, voters, mas gusto nila yung narinig yung katotohanan kaysa yung tumatahimik ka. Kasi naging tahimik ng ating Pangulo for so long. It's about time na magsalita siya ng kung ano yung nangyari at kung ano yung ayaw na niya na mangyari pa ulit sa ating bayan.
Okay, and
how do you, what is your read of Senator Amy Marcos? I mean, she was there at the campaign rally, pero technically she called herself an independent and she turned down the last position in the Alyansa para sa Bagong Pilipinas, right?
Yes. Naging independent candidate si Senator Amy for a simple reason na meron siyang advocacy pinapaniwalaan sa mga Duterte. And of course, meron din naman siyang advocacy pinapaniwalaan sa Alyansa. That's the reason, siguro, kaya siya nag-attend kahapon ng kick-off rally.
Okay. Gerald, anong last word na lang, no? Filipinos and negative campaigning. Alam naman natin tayong mga Pilipino, napaka-hospitable, mapagmahal, kengkoy, funny, ayaw natin ng gulo. Gagana ba ang negative campaigning?
Actually, hindi. For this election, or for any election, hindi naman gumagana ang negative campaigning. Pero, if you will tell the truth, kahit na ito yung negative pa, gagana yan. Diba? Kasi, halimbawa, sa isang sinasabi niyang propeta ni Presidente, totoo naman. Andyan yung mga bata na nagsampa ng kaso. Years ago, sinampa yung kasong yan. 2016, 2017. So, hindi yan gawa-gawa. So, hindi sa negative campaigning. Negative yung ginagawa nila. So, let the people know kung ano yung talaga nangyayari.
Okay. We're going to have to leave that there for now. Maybe we'll talk to you another time. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, political strategist Gerald Dequina.
Still in politics, the Tulfos are not a political dynasty. At least that's what senatorial candidate Ben Tulfo is trying to argue.
Sa aking pananaw, dynastiya ba kami tatlo? Paano ka magkakaroon ng dynastiya? Wala kaming baluarte kung kami nasa Senado. National yan eh. Hindi mo pwedeng kontrolin ang tao, Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. Bakit? Pagdating ba namin sa Senado, nagpapalitan kami ng Rafi Erwin tsaka si Ben?
Ben is a consistent survey frontrunner together with his brother, ACT-CIS Representative Erwin Tulfo. Another brother, Rafi, is already in the Senate. The trio once had a TV show in which they were collectively known as T3. They also have other family members in various local positions. A family that takes over or that turns over elected positions is not the only definition of a dynasty, of course. Contra Daya convener Danilo Araw pointed out that just because they don't have a traditional bailiwick or baluarte does not mean that Tulfos cannot be classified as a political dynasty.
Ang political dynasty ay hindi lang naman yan usapin ng baluarte. Usapin po yan ng pagkakaugnay-ugnay by blood o yung blood relations po ng mga elective officials at saka kasama na rin po yung appointive officials. So sa kaso po ng mga Tulfo, kung talagang meron na talagang dynasty sa kasalukuyan kasi meron kang senador, meron kang isang appointive official, meron kang isang district representative, meron ka pang party list representative, tapos ngayon may dalawa pang Tulfo na gustong pumasok sa Senado. Doon sa sinasabi ni Ben Tulfo, hindi po yan usapin ng walang political dynasty. Ang ginagawa nila, pinapalakas po nila yung kasalukuyang political dynasty po na meron sila.
All right, pausing for another quick break for now, but after that, BPI is turning off its load wallet feature from its mobile banking app starting tomorrow. The details when the big story returns. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us here on The Big Story.
The big question over the impeachment remains unanswered. Can and should the Senate convene as an impeachment court even during the congressional break? There are differing views on this. Retired Supreme Court Associate Justice Adolfo Azcuna, for one, believes the Constitution mandates that the Senate try the case immediately since it is a non-legislative function.
Palagay ko, dapat mag-convince sila at umpisahan nila. Hindi kailangan tapusin ang paglilitis under the 19th Congress. Kailangan lamang, palagay ko, na umpisahan. Dahil pag hindi umpisahan, baka yung jurisdictional tribunal ay hindi ma-attach at it will be too late to attach it under the 20th Congress. Presentation of evidence, that can wait there. But the taking the oath, yun importante. They have to take another oath as members of the tribunal. Once convened, they acquire jurisdiction over the impeachment complaint.
Senate Majority Leader Francis Tolentino is running for re-election, called it being in a constitutional limbo, but says he respects the decision of Senate President Chis Escudero to start the proceedings after the State of the Nation address on July 21st.
The convening is a formal requirement. It starts with the oath or affirmation of the senator judges. That would mean that the trial now has commenced. We're now in the realm of a constitutional limbo, so to speak, until a final determination is made by the 19th Congress when to start, although we respect the decision of SP na after SONA kasi distraction nga ito.
Escudero also cautioned senators from talking about impeachment too much since they will be sitting as judges when the trial commences.
Ang nais kong panatilihin ay yung pagiging pantay, parehas ng korte at pagiging kapanipaniwala ng anumang magiging desisyon ng impeachment court. Yun ang rason kung bakit pinapaalalahanan ko ang mga senador na maghunos dili sa pagpapahayag kaugnay sa impeachment nang wala pa man lang silang nakikitang ebidensya mula sa magkabilang panig o anuman ang kanilang magiging pinal na desisyon sa bagay na ito.
All right, big heads up to all customers of Ayala-led BPI, Bank of the Philippine Islands, because starting tomorrow, February 13, BPI will be halting the Load e-wallet feature on its mobile banking app. In an advisory on its official website, BPI informed users of Maya and GCash that they would need to load their e-wallets through InstaPay or PesoNet interbank fund transfer facilities. As an alternative, users can utilize the app's Transfer to Other Banks feature. However, the bank transfer fee will now be at 25 pesos per transaction. That is a significant increase from the previous 10 peso charge for the Load to e-wallet feature. BPI said that its decision to discontinue the feature was made to align with Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' regulations. I do remember those days when my bank could also just freely transfer at a cheaper rate.
But a lot of people are angry about this because they belong to the same parent company, Ayala Corporation, right? I mean, by that I mean BPI and GCash, right? So they're questioning why you'd have to pay more to transfer from
bank from the same.
Well, according to the bank, it's the BSP regulation that they're trying to follow here. Because I do remember before, especially during COVID when these e-wallets became famous, sometimes it's even free in the beginning to get us to use them. And then they slowly increase the charges. So some banks still charge 10 pesos, some charge 25.
I thought the BPI was trying to bring down the interbank transfer fees because it adds up, right?
Yeah.
25 pesos is also big, right?
That's what they were trying to do. Anyway, we'll try to find out more about this story.
But for tonight, that's it from the three of us here at The Big Story.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.